Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
All right, here we go, Josh.
All right. So today we're going to talk about The Father, and it's based on a play from a French playwright, Florian Zeller. This is his directorial debut, his feature film directorial debut. And so he wrote this play and named the character Antony because he wanted Anthony Hopkins to play this role in some way. So he adapted it into a film, and he was able to get Anthony Hopkins as the star of this film. So we got Anthony Hopkins, we've got Olivia Colman, and they play father and daughter, and he is a man who is going through some sort of dementia later on in his life. And we are kind of like dropped into his situation where there's a fractured timeline, and we're kind of following him as he moves through a few situations in his life. I was surprised at this film because I was not expecting this. I was expecting what I thought Amour was, which I still haven't seen that film, but this movie was so different for me. So I think that if anybody is like tense about this film, there's a lot to it, and it really grabs you from the very beginning, and it holds on to you for the rest of the movie. So I was pleasantly surprised, even though it's really serious subject matter and it's something that is really intense. There's enough filmmaking there for me to grab onto. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Podcast over.
Okay.
We're done. It's a beautiful film. It's just beautiful. First of all, Florian Zeller is a French playwright. And over in France, this had a big success. And it came over to Broadway, and Frank Langella won the Tony for the lead. And yes, he wanted Anthony Hopkins, but the original character's name was not Antony. It was something else. And then when he got Anthony Hopkins, they changed it to Antony, which is a weird way to pronounce it for me. I'm not used to that, but that's how they pronounce it in the movie.
Maybe it's the French version of Anthony. I don't know.
Maybe. It's a beautiful, it sounds right. Let's put it that way. It sounds like that's what his name should sound like. I was not expecting what we got from this film. And just full disclosure to everyone, I have personal experience with this subject. So I don't want to say much more than that because, you know, privacy and stuff like that. But I cannot say enough about how dead on they got this situation. It really is very interesting. And I wasn't expecting it. And by the way, spoilers from this point on, because there's no way to talk about this movie without like maybe giving something away that we might talk about that we think is insignificant in the beginning of the film, but it's not, because you're right. It's a fractured timeline, but is it? Because is it one day? Is it not one day? Well, what is it?
Yeah, I think we get dropped into his situation. I think that's what's so interesting is that there have been other films, there have been other pieces of media about someone who has dementia or someone who has Alzheimer's. But I don't know if I've ever experienced something where I've been right in the middle of it with the person who is experiencing it. And that is what this film does. It keeps you in the state of mind of the main character, of the Anthony Hopkins character. That right there, it already puts you in I don't want to say it's necessarily an unreliable narrator because there is no full narrator. We're just along for the ride with the main character and we experience what he experiences. So that to me is an interesting premise. I purposefully stayed away from this film, much like some of the other movies we talked about earlier on in the year, where I was like, I know we're doing a podcast, so I'm going to literally do media blackout. So I didn't watch a trailer, didn't know anything about this film other than the stars, and that obviously recently it got nominated for 6 Oscars. So yeah, I mean, it was nominated for actor, actress, best picture, adapted screenplay, editing, and production design. So, I mean, that right there.
Oh, not director. And supporting actress, not actress.
She's considered supporting actress?
Yeah.
Right.
And she is. She's there to support his story.
That's
true.
I
get why she's...
Yeah,
I get
okay.
why. I get why. And I think it's fair to say that her time on screen is based on the need of that character to Anthony Hopkins' character's needs. And then I want to piggyback on what you just said. We have seen stories like this before, but all of the stories we've seen about Alzheimer's or dementia or any of these steps in these conditions have always been interpreted by somebody watching the person with it and how they're reflecting how they feel about what they're watching and their interpretation about what they're watching. This film's different. That's why I said spoilers up front, because this film is, yes, it does a fantastic job talking about the daughter, the caregivers, the son-in-law or the possible son-in-law, the housekeeper or the possible housekeeper, the nurse or the possible nurse. And that's why I think I said spoilers up front, because you can't talk about this film once you know how it breaks down without saying, well, yeah, no, was that the nurse or was that the caregiver? Who was that again? That said, it does a beautiful job at just, I like how you say dropping in, because it drops in how the daughter feels without exposition. It does things that if anybody's in that position will, one, instantaneously make you feel you have somebody you can relate to because you're seeing yourself on screen, but you're also, some of your deepest, darkest thoughts are put into this movie. And I was blown away by that. I was very touched by how truthful, and Christopher Hampton, who is a playwright, helped with adapting the screenplay. So we have to give him credit too.
He's also a screenwriter too. He wrote, he's written films.
Dangerous Liaison, Lay Liaison. Yeah. They both do, the two primary people who wrote it, they did a great job at not hesitating from the truth of the situation. So if a caregiver's had a thought, it's in the movie. If the daughter's had a thought, for better or for worse, the good ones, the bad ones, it's in the movie. But what's most fascinating to me is that you actually come out of the film with an idea of what it might be like to actually have dementia, to actually say, that's why somebody with dementia does that. It's not explained to you. You're allowed to see it in the way that the scene changes, the people change, the architect changes, the scenery changes. So that to me was fascinating, because instead of trying to understand from an outsider's point of view of dementia, you're actually an Anthony Hopkins, man. Whoa. Wow. Yeah.
I mean, the last thing I saw him in was Westworld, and he's pretty much like straight down the line. That's not a heavy lift for Anthony Hopkins. He could do Westworld with two hands tied behind his back and, underwater. But this movie, it asks a lot of that character. His range is absolute just dejection or confusion or elation or titillation, or, I mean, there's so many things that he has to play. There's so many emotions. There's so many, like you've said in the past, motivations that he has, whether it's to impress someone or whether it's to chastise someone or whatever. It's a lot, and it happens in such a short period of time. It's only like an hour and a half long movie. And
it's quick.
And it is quick. And I think a lot of that has to do with the editing, and a lot of that has to do with us being pushed with him in each of these different scenarios and not knowing what's going to happen. Like, you seriously don't know what's going to happen next. Like, you don't know where you're going to be thrown into or when you're going to be thrown into.
And there's a point in the middle of the film that you think you're trapped in one day.
Oh, yep.
One moment.
Yep.
Like, if they talk about that frickin' chicken one more time, God, I'm going to lose my mind. What is happening here? That's kind of probably not a funny joke, but I don't mean that any disrespect. But what I was going to finish saying was that he's so charming and so likable that you immediately connect to him. So you go on this journey with him. And I think an hour and a half is good, because I don't think you could handle anything else, or I couldn't handle anything else. And what you were saying about the levels of where he goes emotionally, I don't often see where an actor has to play 4 different emotions in one beat. And he does in this. And he pulls it off. And I have to say this because I have to get it out. I mean, no disrespect to Chadwick Boseman, none. If and when Chadwick Boseman wins the Oscar, I will be 100% behind him. As a matter of fact, I just read an article today that the Oscars are going to be boring this year, not because we're predicting it, but because whoever wins, we're all going to be okay with it. There's not a person on the list that we're going to be like, it's not Joker, it's not Bohemian Rhapsody, it is Green Book. We're not going to be having to say the favorite was our favorite movie and it only won Best Actress. That movie shouldn't have won. There's controversy behind those. There's none this year, because if Chadwick Boseman wins, he deserves it. But I will say this, I am a little bit surprised that Anthony Hopkins is not the front runner. I am. And Anthony Hopkins is 82 years old, and you're right, he looks great. And this is a second nomination 2 years in a row at his age. Very unusual. And I'm watching this movie thinking to myself, trying not to remember Oscars and all that other stuff while I'm in the middle of it. And I don't really. I kind of can go with the flow without thinking about things like that. But when I came out of it, I went, if he wins, there should be no blowback whatsoever for any reason. Whatever your reasoning behind it, I will understand why you want to give blowback, but you can't fight this one because he is at the top of his game in this movie. And he is, I hate to keep saying on point, but there is not a better expression for me. There's just not.
So, okay, do you feel like plays ask more of actors since this is a play? I mean, we can draw a direct correlation to that, but is it one of these things where it's like in a film, if something is developed as a film from the beginning, you may lean on things like set pieces or multiple characters or a intricate plot. There's multiple things that make a big movie, or that make a fancy movie a fancy movie. I'm thinking of something like, whether it's Avengers Endgame or Memento, they both have, whether it's a unique conceit or whether it's just a billion characters that are having to interact with each other. But inherently a play, and at least a play that's easy to stand up, is going to have a minimal amount of characters, a minimal amount of set pieces. And the thing that's going to drive it is going to be the interactions between the characters that are on stage. So the thing that makes a play like that dynamic might be what you're asking the characters to do, and especially like the main characters to do. So have you seen that dynamism in character in plays more versus movies?
Well, see, that's interesting that you put it that way. I don't really look at it that way. For theater, it's the audience who participates more. They have to use their imagination. They have to fill in the blanks. They have to see a chair that really is a student. I make reference to that. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. It's from a play called The Night Thoreau Spent in Jail, and Thoreau has to whip his students because a person who's running the school doesn't think he's using enough authority. So there's one desk chair on stage, and he flips it over his knee, and he hits the chair as if he's hitting the kids. Huh. It's going to make me a little emotional because it was devastating. I was in that play. I used to not be around when that scene would happen because it would kill me, because I would see a kid. I wouldn't see a chair. I would see a kid, and he had to whip every single kid. And so they did this really interesting thing where the chair got thrown over the actor's legs. He hit the chair. He spun the chair around, put it back where it originally was, and then put it over his knee as if another kid was walking up and going over his knee. It was really well done. Plus, the actor playing him was superb. So I look at that differently. I think that the audience has to participate on a different level. I think that a character on stage has a larger time to accomplish those moments, especially in a monologue, especially in a long speech. They have a longer time to engage the audience. In a movie, you have 10 seconds of a look from one actor to another actor. And look at the scene with Benicio del Toro in Traffic, where he's driving the truck, and it's maybe 35 seconds long, maybe 50 seconds long. I don't know. It's not long at all. And it's the reason why he won the Oscar is all in that one moment. For me, it is. So I think movies are about moments, and theater, I think you can expand upon those moments, but it's just a different thing. You can engage in an audience different than, in a movie, but I think one is not easier than the other. I don't think one is harder than the other. I actually think it might be harder to find 10 seconds worth of an emotion in your eyes looking across the room of an actor who's not even really there, probably, and play those moments with nobody else but a big black voided camera in front of you. That's difficult. So I think they both have their challenges, and I think they both have their benefits, if you will.
So why do you think it is that actors aren't asked to do this more in films?
I think it has to do with the material, what the material is, and I think it has to do with, movies are an industry based on selling tickets and making money. It's an industry. And I'm not saying that theater isn't. It is too. Broadway has taken a hit. So the city has taken a hit in this last year. It brings a lot of people to that city, Broadway does. So it's an industry. It might have a little bit to do with generational attention spans. Maybe back, before big blockbuster movies and big epic Avenger films, which I love. I'm not going to disrespect any of that stuff. I love it. I just watched Endgame again. I love it. I think it has to do with material. I think it has to do with what a screenwriter can get across in a movie versus in a play. Exposition is very interesting, because in a movie, you think about exposition. In a play, a character is actually doing something as they're explaining something, which, just a side note, Promising Young Woman does that. That's what happens. When Cassie is explaining what happened in the past or what happened in the future or what happened in the situation that she's in, it's exposition, but it's character based. She's explaining it as if she's the character involved or another character's involved, but it's still exposition. But exposition on film is different than on stage. For whatever reason, it just is. You get a lot of people talking about how in the new Justice League movie, there's a lot of exposition, a lot of explanation about stuff, a lot of stuff. And I'm like, well, a lot of stuff needed to be explained because it was kind of ripped out. You know, we're talking a 2-hour movie versus a 4-hour movie. A lot of stuff was, they could have done it better in the new Justice League, but it's there for a reason. So maybe it just has to do with how a screenwriter thinks an audience is going to adapt to what they're watching. I don't really know. It's a good question. It might have a lot to do with people just don't have the energy level to sit through something like that. That said, there's an audience for it, obviously. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, it's nothing but monologues. So there's an audience for it and people are seeing that movie. And so maybe that's good. Maybe they'll, it reteaches people how to watch movies. But I don't think it's purposeful. Why do you need a Tony Stark monologue? Why do you need it?
Yeah. Well, I think what it comes down to is that it is pretty awesome that when it is asked of a character, whether it be Anthony Hopkins or Viola Davis or Chadwick Boseman also, I mean, it's amazing when they can rise to the occasion, when we don't get as much of those type of complex character development via emotion. I don't know. I thought it was interesting that I was engaged. For me, like, this is the engineer in me. The reason why I was engaged is that I wanted to figure out how the puzzle was being built, because it is kind of like a Jenga puzzle where we're stacking pieces up and we're trying to figure out where the next piece goes. And the next piece doesn't necessarily go on top. It could go at the bottom. It could go in the middle. And there's no way of knowing where the next piece is supposed to go. And so we're having to fit all that. I mean, there were some tropes in this film, obviously. Like, obviously, when he talks about, I mean, we're 5 minutes into the movie, he's talking about his other daughter and why she doesn't visit him. And it's like, well, obviously she's dead. I mean, come on, that's basic stuff. I wasn't surprised by something like that. But what it did make me realize is the fact that someone experiencing the loss of their child is catastrophic. It is so emotionally wrecking and draining that I can't imagine what someone would go through to lose a child. And in this film, he has to go through that emotion more than once. And he may not remember the last time he went through it, but he still has to feel those feelings and he still has to reckon with that scenario and that situation multiple times. And that's just horrible. That's something that you don't realize initially. You kind of think about, someone with dementia and you're like, oh, well, they don't know that they just put their watch on. Why don't they just look on their wrist and see that their watch is on? It's easier to be annoyed with something like that as opposed to understanding or trying to tie into the fact that this person is having to reframe their reality constantly. And that has to be mentally draining for someone. The symbolism of that watch I thought was really good, and I didn't really put it together until like way late in the film. But just the fact that the film plays with time and that the symbolism of that watch, it's like him having the watch allows him to feel grounded in time, but the fact that he doesn't have a watch is representative of him not knowing where he is or not knowing when he is. And so that's a good metaphor, obviously. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about this guy, but Florian Zeller he's working on multiple levels here.
I'm wondering how much practical or personal experience he's had with it, because I am blown away how, like, the watch is a thing. And what I've discovered is that watches, wallets, newspapers, glasses, like reading glasses are all touchstones. And the process of going through and putting the wallet away at night and the process of putting the wallet in your back pocket during the day is a touchstone of how your day has begun and ended. And so you have from my personal experience, it seems to be that is a grounding mechanism to say, okay, I might not have known what happened from the time I woke to the time I went to bed, but I know what happens in the morning and I know what happens at night. And that wallet going in my back pocket is part of the morning. And the wallet going in my hiding space is part of the night. So it's a touchstone of time for them, at least from what I can perceive. So I thought that was brilliant. If he just did research and like got this right, I would be amazed because he got a lot of things right. That said, I do want to mention one scene that I thought, I have questions about it. When Imogen Poots says to him, oh yeah, your daughter told me what happened to your other daughter. I was surprised that a healthcare worker would mention that.
She wouldn't. If she has experience with working with someone with dementia, she wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I thought that was a bit strange, and I thought it was maybe purposeful. I just thought somebody else could have brought that point up to him, because that's allowing the audience to now know for sure that the daughter has passed away. And side note, is that Imogen Poots in the picture when you see the... Okay,
it's Imogen Poots in the picture. It's Imogen Poots in the hospital room, and that's actually the better. I mean, if we're talking about critiques, that's actually the better way to do it, is to have her call out to him and to have him see her in the hospital without the weird Imogen Poots interaction. It's just the revelation of her.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with him thinking that a nurse looked like his sister, his daughter, or his daughter. No,
that works.
It's the conversation they were having, because you're right. I think she should have known. That said, there is no way to get around that. So I give him a pass on that, because when she talks about here's your little blue pill, and he goes, how old do you think I am? Don't talk to people that way. I'm a grown person. That is 100% truthful, because you think you're trying to lighten it up and you're trying to make it easier on the person. Just take your pill, and you're trying to be happy-go-lucky about it, but he's not 5 years old.
Yeah, but what's the last scene of the film?
Oh, that's so devastating.
So, I mean, it works, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it does too, because here's why it works, because people do that. People do act like Imogen Poots, here's your pill, thinking they're being kind and gentle, not condescending and not talking down to somebody and not talking to a 5-year-old instead of an 82-year-old. People don't mean it that way. That's not how they mean it. But they are coming across that way to somebody who has had a whole life. He has had a whole life. He's had a wife. He's had 2 kids. He's had his own flat. He's had his own business. He's had his own life. We don't think about it. We're seeing it from our perspective about him, not from his perspective of how he wants to be treated by us. So that needed to be in there. I thought that was on point. That was, and everybody who's been in healthcare, who's been in this situation goes, oh yeah, I've done that. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
all the people who will experience this film while they're helping a family member will never do that now. And people who now will eventually have to help family members won't do that either if they see this movie, because it's a good point.
Yeah. Well, we haven't talked about the Mark Gatiss / Rufus Sewell character. I'm not really sure what his name is. Paul, I guess. James, maybe. James, I think, is the ex-husband who, if I've got this right, we're starting to get into the weeds here. So, I mean, we're like 30 minutes into this. We both like this film. I'm going to start really nitpicking here. I think that James is her ex-husband, because she does call him out by name. And we do not see him or any representation of him in this film at all. That is what I got out of the way that the film was done. So we do have a character named Paul, who in real life is played by Rufus Sewell, but is also represented by Mark Gatiss, who we've seen in Sherlock and other things. But that character is a character I was not expecting. And it's someone who is not willing to accept what his girlfriend, I guess at the time, or fiance or whatever they are, the difficult decisions that she's having to make. And he is malicious, and we don't realize how malicious he is until most of the way through the film. And it actually starts to help some of the things fall into place a lot better. But that's not an unreliable narrator. That is someone who's literally like playing with someone and taking advantage maliciously of the situation that Anthony is in. And I didn't even know that was even a possibility, or that someone could even do that. But that is what happened in this film. That's the scary part.
Yeah, I thought about that too, but then it dawned on me. What is real and what's not real in this film? You don't know. What happens and what doesn't happen is not reliable information, because I figured out halfway through the film that these people might not represent who they were to him, and he might be getting them mixed up, but what they do represent is an emotion a caregiver has gone through, because she walks into his bedroom and tries to choke him to death. So did that really happen?
Well, the way that it's edited is that she is thinking of that.
Correct.
Because it's a smash cut to her in a
Right.
different room in a different time.
We've been set up to the point before all of the interaction happened with the ex-husband, the husband, the nurse, whoever it is, to believe that we're looking at things through Antony's eyes. So if she's daydreaming her frustrations away and daydreams about choking her father, then what's he daydreaming about? What's he thinking about? He's going to get things mixed up. And all I could say was, are there people out there like Paul, if that's his name, Rufus Sewell's character? Yes, there are. But I actually believe that's just an aspect of how people feel internally when they have to deal with this situation. And instead of making it some kind of like exposition about how Antony says that last nurse, he slapped me or he treated me poorly, instead of doing that, he gives you a character that does that to represent that emotional frustration that a person would go through. And here's why I know it's factual. The thought does go through your mind. Are they doing that on purpose? Do they know the difference? Wait a second. 15 minutes ago, you knew what we were talking about. Now you're saying this. Are you messing with me? For whatever reason, your mind does think, and I think it's because you can't understand what a person's mind is going through when they're in the middle of dementia. So you can't possibly relate to it on any level. So in order to believe it in your reality, a person who's a caregiver or family member or somebody involved with somebody with dementia, instead of being able to deal with it, part of the denial is believing that they're purposely acting like they don't remember something, because that's way easier to compute than actually thinking your father can't remember your dead sister. You can't possibly understand that. How could he not? I'm assuming the situation with the daughter happened before dementia set in. And it's my understanding is most of dementia is short-term memory. So the memories that they have in the past, they still have, they get them mixed up and they cling to them and they make them their present memory because they can't remember what they ate 15 minutes ago. And they can't remember that their alive daughter just spoke to them, or was that the nurse? They can't put that together. So they cling on to an old memory because that's clear to them. So I don't know when the daughter died. So why would he not have a memory of that? So he must have been in the middle of dementia when she was dying, because why doesn't he remember that? Then again, all bets are off. I'm not saying I completely understand it. I just think that, and maybe it's denial that I believe people could act like that.
Well, and I think the thing that kind of got me was that the first time we even meet him with Mark Gatiss playing the character, and he's like, "Why are you here?" And Mark Gatiss says, "Well, I live here." And he's like, "How long have you been married to my daughter?" And he says, "Well, we're going on 10 years. Well, that could very well just have been a malicious thing that Paul could have said, because if in fact it is Paul, then they aren't even married.
No. Well, okay, my take on it was that memory happened. That actually happened. They were married for 10 years, and he is seeing the nurse's face, or the orderly or the doctor, or whoever that guy represents. He's seeing the face of the orderly who's really in his present day as his son-in-law. So his son-in-law and his daughter could have been married for 10 years.
Why would he have been living with his daughter and son-in-law when he had his flat at that point? He'd only moved in with her because he had a caregiver that he...
You got a point.
This James guy, whoever her ex-husband is gone, and we don't see him. That's what I got from the film. And that it's just the Paul character, the boyfriend, who's playing with him, who's like, you know what, I can say anything I want to you and you're not going to remember it in 15 minutes or whatever, in an hour, or by the time that my girlfriend gets back.
And I'm not trying to stick up for Paul. If he did do that, he's a jerk. Okay. I'm not trying to stick up for him, but maybe he represents the voice of frustration that the daughter can't release.
Yes,
Maybe he's saying things to the father that the daughter can't say. Whether or not he really did say it to the father's face or whatever, that frustration and that need to move on with your life. And apparently they're a brand new couple. But see, okay, so I don't mean to confuse it anymore, but you have started digging deep. And this is the one thing that I was a little confused about. And that's a lot. You know, that says a lot, because I think I followed everything pretty clearly, finger quotes. If she was going to move to Paris.
Why doesn't she remember telling him?
Right. But she, at the end of the film, moves to Paris because their nurse speaks the truth of fact at the end. You remember you came here with us a couple of months ago or however long ago, your daughter's in Paris. Well, why did she have to go to Paris to meet Paul if Paul lived in London with her at the time? That I didn't understand. And by the way, side note, when they were trying to figure out what his name was and they went, oh, is it Paul? Is it James? I swear, I thought they're going to say his name's Paul James. I was like, I'm out. I'm completely done if they're going to name this character Paul James. I cannot be involved that closely with this. It's too much.
And they're going to look
for me.
into the camera, the game style, and be like, go to your door.
I wouldn't be surprised about that. I just dropped my earpiece. Hold on a second. So yeah, that's the one part that I was getting a little bit confused about because I was not sure we should have taken anything literally though.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point I was like, wait, didn't she say she was going to, okay, and that was a confusing scene with the doctor. No, I'm staying in London. So that must have happened before, but she ends up going to Paris. That's a fact. But why was Paul there?
Yeah, I don't know if we're supposed to be experiencing these things in real time with him, or if we are supposed to be experiencing his memories as they're coming to him of these situations.
I think it's that.
Yeah, and that would make more sense. So if we're experiencing a memory of him going to see the doctor, and then he tells the doctor, oh, well, she's going to Paris. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to Paris. That could be him already knowing in this present time, thinking back on that memory and imparting new knowledge to that memory when, in fact, he went to the doctor and she hadn't even met Paul yet or something. I don't know.
See, that's brilliant because when they went to the doctor, she would have still been in London. He wouldn't have known about Paris at that point, but he's taking an old memory and putting a new thing attached to it because he can't handle the fact that she is going to Paris. So that's his way. Yeah. See, that's why I think it's a really good exploration into what it might be like to have dementia. The closest that I've seen, and not just because of my personal connection, but because of all the other things I've seen, all the other movies I've seen, all the other stuff I've read, it's never really quite tapped into this. I don't think they've ever done it from the point of view of somebody who has the condition. I mean, they do, but it's always like they're showing what's happening instead of experiencing what happens. It's like they're showing the emotion, they're not living the emotion. And like I said, it's always about the person reacting to the person with dementia. So it's fascinating. I don't even know if it's that important, to be honest with you. But I do want to bring up that since we've jumped into Paul James, fiance, caregiver, whoever it may be, I'm curious about is, and what breaks my heart is that did Paul actually slap him like that? Did he actually beat him like that? Because he beats him. Okay. And I think he really did hit him. And I don't know how that's staged, and I don't want to really watch it again to see that, but I might have to watch it just to watch that again because I'm wondering how they staged that because it looks to me like he's really hitting him. And that's hard enough. How are you going to hit 82-year-old Anthony Hopkins?
Sir Anthony Hopkins, right?
Yeah.
Isn't he a sir by now?
Yeah, he is. And, you know, he's also Hannibal Lecter. Don't trust anything. You know, he might eat your brain in about 10 minutes.
Make sure there's no Chianti laying around. You know?
Right. No doubt. See, I actually think that all of this stuff didn't necessarily happen per se, that these are memories based on emotions that the character's having, and that he's so frustrated with this Paul character coming into his life and disrupting his life that he has to make this character beat him up to believe that he's a bad guy. Maybe that's just a sugar-coated way of looking at it, and I don't want to believe Paul would ever do something like that. And I don't doubt people do stuff like that. Some people are awful. But was it a memory Anthony had, or was it a frustration level that, because we just talked about how he put an old memory and a new memory together. The doctor's office is an old memory, Paris is a new memory. Combine them two, okay? So if that's plausible, then also, isn't it plausible that Paul didn't slap him in the face, but he believes he did because he hates Paul that much, and he's created this conflict in his mind? I don't know. I just want to be in denial about it.
Well, and and another thing that bolsters that argument is that, so what are the chances that his flat that he had owned for over 30 years and his daughter's flat would be exactly the same, except for the fact that his daughter's flat has new light fixtures and an updated kitchen and doesn't have all the books in the library and that kind of it. Like, it's the same flat, but there's definitely a difference between him in his kitchen putting up the olive oil and figuring out what to do with the plastic bag and shoving it in his pocket in that kitchen, which has like old dark wood cabinets and her putting her chicken together in the fancy, sleek, lighter cabinets and the weird paper mache lighting fixtures and all that stuff. I mean, those are two different flats, but they are laid out like they're probably in the same building, I guess. So is that saying that they both have two flats in the same building with the same architecture, or is that him conflating his flat with her flat, and in reality her flat looked totally different, but he made them look the same in his memories? I don't really know.
I don't know either, but at the end in the hospital room, all that stuff that's in his bedroom of his flat is in that hospital bedroom at the end.
Yeah, the radio is definitely in there.
The curtains are the same. I think the bedspread's the same. I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% sure, but it rang a bell when I saw it. I was like, oh, it's the same room. That's where he was waking up. Yeah, that's an interesting question, because maybe that has to do with logistical things when it comes to doing it as a play. Like, I kept thinking to myself afterwards, I thought about this movie quite a bit. And then it also rabbit holed into, well, when they did it as a play, how did they do that part? Like, did they change the flat? Did they just change curtains? What did they change? Or maybe they didn't change anything.
Well, do you remember the scene where she's in the kitchen? He's asking her, he's like, hey, what did they do with the other daughter's picture that was on above the mantle?
Oh,
and she's like, oh, that has never had a picture. You know, this is my flat, Dad. There's never been a picture up there. And he sees the outline of where a picture was. So,
well, that also begs the question, when you see the moving boxes and everything broken down in the house, is that her moving to Paris and him moving out? Or is that him moving from his old flat into her flat? What is that? What's that time frame? I think in the long run, it's fascinating conversation, but I don't really think it means anything. I think we're getting the point of the film. At least we've taken so much from it. So I'm not going to deny that we're looking into stuff that's interesting to us. But in the long run, I think that stuff's supposed to just hit you and go in. And then you're not really supposed to figure out the puzzle pieces, because I think it's like you've taken 5 different puzzles and thrown them on the table. And they're all the same size and they all have the same amount of pieces and they have 5 different pictures. But there's 2 pieces missing from this one and there's 3 pieces missing from that one. And you're trying to put together one picture from 5 different boxes. It could never be done. It just could never be done. It's just never going to happen. So maybe that's what's happening here. And maybe the trying to understand that this is the experience that somebody's having and being more sympathetic towards a person who's has this condition, is maybe there isn't a purpose to movies and theater and all that other stuff. I don't believe that. I believe that they're learning. No, I'm not saying, I just said I don't believe that. I'm saying that maybe some people think there isn't like a full-fledged reason for something, like this is just the experience for 2 hours and then we're done. I don't believe that. I believe that they are definitely educational tools, emotional tools, imagination tools. I believe that they are for purpose. I believe you go and see a play and you can change the world by the words in a play. I believe that. I believe that in music too. I believe music can change the world. Idealistic as it is, maybe some people don't believe that. But for me, something like The Father is going to ring true to somebody who has no practical experience, as same as somebody who does have practical experience, because it's about the human condition and it's about being empathetic towards a human being going through something that we don't understand.
So I think that movies, I think that art inherently is there to help us to understand the world that we live in. And that is ultimately the point of all of it. So much in the same way that this film may help us to understand or to empathize with people who are going through dementia without those people being able to advocate for themselves necessarily, I think that this film has elements to it that help us understand how certain things, like you said, can be grounding. Like the watch is grounding for him. Music is grounding for him. Opera. He's got speakers in every room. Like he literally has at least 2 speakers in every single room. And he's listening to CDs on his headphones and he noodles around on the piano. So music is something that helps to ground him and helps to keep him in his element, it seems like. And so maybe that's another way to be able to relate to people too. But I thought that was another element of this film that was interesting to me. One thing that I definitely wanted to bring up before we got done is the bold lighting choices in this film. Did you notice the lighting in this film?
Yeah, I did.
It's using essentially window lighting plus spotlights. I mean, it is literally spotlights. Like, they are using single source direct lighting on the characters to the point where there's harsh shadows on the opposite side of the character's face. And in the way that they are framing these characters, obviously it's not going to be like soap opera lighting where every single person's face is illuminated in exactly the same way no matter where they stand in the room. It's not like that, but at the same time, it's a really bold choice in lighting, because there's usually in a lighting setup, you'll have multiple lights. You'll have lights behind a person to like, they would be considered like key lights to light their hair or something to make them stand out from the background. Or you would have multiple lights either underneath someone or even reflections. If you've got a window, there would be, and there were certain times where they used reflections. There was one scene where Olivia Colman was on the phone and she picked up a huge like jewel thing, like fake diamond thing that was like 5 inches in diameter or something, and she kind of held it and looked at it, and the light from the window reflected through it and illuminated her face. So they were able to use essentially like a bounce card. They were able to use something to bounce that light onto her face to illuminate her a little bit better. But there were a lot of scenes that were just, you might even consider them poorly lit. But I think that it was unnatural to the point where it did look like a scene in a play potentially where the lights go down around a character and a single light is on that character for whatever reason. But I was okay with it because it was a bolt. Like, it was one of those things where it's like, if you would have done like a half measure and kind of tried to do that and didn't go all the way, it probably wouldn't have worked as well as I think it did, where it was noticeable and obviously done for a reason. And maybe it was done in the same way that we're talking about, where they were making purposeful changes to the set design to make it confusing to us as a moviegoer, or to keep us in that kind of discombobulated state. The lighting was also, I felt the same way. It was a little off-putting. So not in a bad way, but in an okay way.
Well, think about how you think about memories. You know, when you think about, or a memory comes to you, or a dream is a good example, the lighting is always askewed. It's always different than, you're like, wait, that did happen that way, but I don't really remember it being like that. It didn't look like that, but you know it felt like that. And so maybe it's supposed to create some kind of like alternate reality or some kind of dreamlike thing. Is it a blend of two different memories? Is this room really her flat's bedroom and his bedroom at the same time? Who knows? You know, it's fascinating. I would like to read up on the director and how he felt about certain things, because I need to know now, does he have any kind of personal experience?
History.
Or, yeah, because that's going to amaze me if he doesn't. And what is the reason why he chose to do, did he choose to do the set differently in the play as he did in the movie? Or was that not something they could do? Or, you know, did they flip a wall? How did that all work? So I'm going to definitely do research. But you know what I'm the most fascinated by at this point? We've spent almost an hour and so many minutes talking about this movie, and Olivia Colman's name just got mentioned for the first time. Shame on us.
Oh,
Shame on me. Yes, absolutely.
But she's the leadoff hitter who always gets on base. She's the person you can count on to just work. So maybe I think maybe I may just expect her to be good. So it's like, if she's not good, that's when you talk about her. But
well, I jest when I say shame on us, but I mean, I'm saying it in a joking manner, but I'm surprised that we haven't talked about her specifically. And she's nominated for the Oscar for this. You did say actress and I said supporting actress. She was mentioned there, and she's been mentioned as the character. So I guess that's the high holy compliment, is that we were not talking about the actress Olivia Colman acting as the daughter. We're talking about the daughter. And really, we haven't really spoken about Anthony Hopkins as Anthony Hopkins. We've mentioned him, but not like every time we don't say Anthony Hopkins, we say the character's name. So maybe that says a lot about it. But she is quite brilliant in this. And I think about her Oscar speech when she won for The Favorite, and she said, "Oh, I hope my kids are watching. Oh, if they're not, no, good on you. But this is never going to happen again." And it's yeah, I love her Oscar speech. It's really one of the best I've ever seen. And I never rewatched those things, but I've rewatched hers a couple of times. And now I'm thinking to myself, it might happen again. I mean, she's as much of a front runner as anybody else. And will she deserve it? Absolutely. Because the emotional stuff that she has to go through is devastating. You know what I thought was the most beautiful scene in the world? And it's all shot from behind them. When she's consoling him when he's upset and crying. And she's going, don't cry, little daddy. Don't cry, little daddy. And it's from behind. That's the scene that got me the most because I could hear her as a little girl saying that to him. And I don't know if that was anything Olivia Colman tried to do or if that's just instinctually what she did. But I could see her as a little girl. It's okay, daddy. It's okay, little daddy. Your little girl's here. I could hear her saying that as a little person. And it touched me. I mean, there's a lot of emotional stuff in this movie. And I rode the wave, and I was actually pretty good. I actually was a little standoffish. I kind of stood on the sidelines of the movie, and maybe that was a defense mechanism. Very well could be. But it's always really good to see somebody who's already won an Oscar get another nomination. It kind of solidifies their, if anybody had any doubt that they deserved the first Oscar, well, now they have a second Oscar nomination. Not that that means anything, but to me it does. So I don't think this movie could have been done without her, specifically her heart is so filled. I mean, it's so, and she can cry at a drop of the hat. And when you see it coming, it's like, oh no, don't. And then you're in the middle of it. And I believe she is just one of those actresses who comes in, does it, feels it, and goes home. And I kind of know that because I've heard interviews with her and they were like, how can you do Broadchurch about the murder of a kid and go home with that? She was like, I don't go home with that. It's over there on the set. It's not, I don't take that home. And they're like, well, how do you find such deep emotion? She was like, because it's sad. It's a kid who died, and she's very point blank about it, but she is fantastic in this. And I just wanted to take a moment to talk about her.
Well, yeah. And every time we talk about Olivia Colman, I always bring up the fact that I've heard Olivia Colman and seen Olivia Colman so many more times in a lot of the British comedy things that she did way before any of this Oscar stuff started happening for her and before Broadchurch. But she was a part of kind of like a comedy troupe that was headed up by David Mitchell and Robert Webb. And they did a radio show called The Mitchell and Webb Sound. And they did a show called The Mitchell and Webb Look. And then they did a show called Peep Show. And she's in all of those things. Yeah. And they're all absolutely hilarious. And she's great in it. And like I said, I've experienced much more media with Olivia Colman. And it's funny that, like, I don't want to be like I was there before it was cool person, but
you were there before it was cool
like
thing.
That. I feel like that. And I feel like,
then own it, dude.
Like, no, the big thing is that I just want people to see all of the other things that she's done. Like, gotcha. I don't want them to start with Broadchurch and end with The Father in 2021. I want them to go all the way back and see how brilliant she is as a comedic actress and what she can do when she's not crying over whether to go with her boyfriend to Paris or take care of her father with dementia. Like, that's deep stuff, but she can do a lot of other things. So yeah, there's so much more out there that people can experience with her. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, I mean, that's a great place to end it. And so you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can check us out on Twitter at actorengineer. We have a Facebook page. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. And you can see us on YouTube. Just search for Actor and Engineer Podcast. And we'll see you next time.